Public Research Center Henri Tudor in Luxembourg. It's my pleasure to introduce you the keynote speech of Professor Michael Kanevsky. Professor Kanevsky graduated in physics and has a PhD in plasma physics, both from the State University of Moscow. He's now currently full professor at the University of Lausanne and the Earth Surface Institute, and he's involved in the application of cutting-edge machine learning algorithms and geostatistics to a wealth of domains, especially dealing with environmental data analysis, but also most recently with social data analysis and economic data analysis. I will not speak longer. I will leave the floor to Professor Kanevsky, who will probably contage you with his very high enthusiasm and a very nice way to convey important messages with simple words. So, Professor Kanevsky, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to thank the organizers of this conference, very interdisciplinary, I would say transdisciplinary, and for inviting me to give at least invited presentation of keynote. So it will be the topic about learning from environmental data, recent achievements and new challenges. Of course, I have selected only part of what we are doing, and that's why I will just show you the contents. I will speak not about all possible learning from environmental data because there are many possibilities. I will speak basically about statistical learning from environmental data. I will concentrate more on machine learning and application machine learning for environmental data, what we are doing already during the last 20 years. Data and objectives of the study, what are the problems, why do we need some other techniques and new developments, generic methodology, how it uses data, some efficient machine learning models, case studies, new challenges, and conclusions. So this is a topic. These are topics of my presentation. So first, I would like everybody knows this that we are speaking now that we are in this first paradigm in data-intensive scientific discovery, and of course the same we observe with environmental sciences, geosciences. Many new satellites, many monitoring systems, mobile, fixed, etc., are collecting everyday data. So the problem is how we treat and use this data. For example, satellite images and data, only a very small part is treated, and all the rest waste of new efficient algorithms which are now currently in development. So these are scientific paradigms hundreds of thousands of years ago, last year, and today data exploration is science. I will not speculate about this topic because there are different views how to do it, what to do, and also about big data. So I will continue just to show you what is our experience in these fields of what is called now sometimes data science, if you want. So we are basically working with geo-environmental data. So pollution analysis and modeling, these are traditional topics of this analysis. Remote sensing images and data. Here I will not speak about remote sensing topic because this is a bit separate, there are some sessions. But our experience is we have done some studies in so-called change detection. So the problem is you want you have a sequences of images and you want to detect changes in these images just because you are looking for development of cities or urban zones. Or another very important application is catastrophe. So you want to detect as soon as possible consequences and to make some good intelligent decisions. This is data adaptation and active learning, also some other technique from machine learning we have applied. So for natural hazards, I will show some examples of these figures, not too much. For landslides, for example, forest fires, avalanches, we are working and we start to work more on this experience this summer. Time series chaos, socio-economic and geodemographic data. These are also very interesting and challenging data set because, of course, everybody knows that we are not living in a geographical space. We are living rather, I would say, in so-called socio-economic cube, which can be very high dimensional. For example, in Switzerland, we are lucky we have very good information about socio-economic demographic situation. So it is hectometric information, 100 by 100 meters for the whole country. And at each cell you have hundreds of different indicators and information. So the problem is to understand how we can explore, how we can use this information, of course, for example, for sustainable development. So financial data, crime data, epidemiology, these are other topics where we can use this as a data. What are the problems with environmental data? What are these data? Everybody knows, but just to tell. These data are multi-scale. They are usually variable at several scales, which is a challenge for modeling. So uncertainties. Of course, there are uncertainties because we have only some resolution of data. There are also measurement errors, etc., etc. So these uncertainties we see from the beginning, from raw original data until the result. Input space. This is an interesting topic because usually when you are speaking about environmental data, people are thinking about 2 3-dimensional space, geographical plus minus altitude or digital elevation order. But in fact, all these phenomena, natural hazards, really, they are living not in this space. You have to add many more characteristics, so-called features, geo-features, and then this space is going until dimensions 10, 20, 50. I will show some examples later. These additional features, for example, for avalanches, you have, of course, digital elevation model, you have snow conditions, you have meteorology, you have a lot of other factors which you should add to analyze and first to extract patterns and then to make some predictions. So the multivariate, non-homogeneous environmental phenomena are nonlinear. Of course, we are living in a world which is full of nonlinearity and dependencies. So data plus model integration and assimilation, it means that when we have also some equations and models from so-called science-based models, like physical models, meteorological models, etc., how to combine all these sometimes huge information from data, from sensors, etc., with models, not just to calibrate them, but really integrate together. So now, from the point of view of learning, we can consider all these problems like first pattern recognition, pattern modeling, and pattern predictions. The good question is, what is a pattern? So I would say, for me, we can tell that data, we can put some general fundamental equations, data equals information, patterns or structures, forms, plus noise or unexplained something. So the idea of good modeling is to extract, to model all what is structured or what is information, and then to control what is rest. Okay, here we have different possibilities, like in geostatistics. We can use variography, so if it is just pure nugget effect variogram, then you can tell that there is no structure, data completely uncorrelated in space. Or in machine learning, I will show you some examples. We can use some efficient tools from K-nearest or general regression neural networks, extreme learning machines, etc., etc. So now, how we can pose this problem about learning, or statistical learning, what is that? Huh? A generative model is like this. We have a generator which generates, in fact, data, information, and all this stuff. We have supervisor who is collecting and looking what is the learning machine. Learning machine, for example, let's think about this kind of black box which is able or capable to learn your data. And supervisor is controlling the quality of learning. It's like with students during semester and with a professor. This is exactly the same procedure, only it's in imitation of the same. So we have this possibility to do, and first, when we have data, or so-called training examples or measurements, so with the principle of induction, we think about that from this particular data, we can produce rather general model. It is the principle of induction, okay? And then with this model, finally, we can make some predictions at new places, or if you want, if you put a grid, you can produce a map or some kind of pattern. This is a classical way to do it, but there is also another way to do it, like transduction, so from particular to particular. This is quite now established approach in machine learning community, because maybe we don't have enough, if you know where we would like to make predictions, maybe we don't have enough information to first to generate a very general model which is good everywhere. We can concentrate and then prepare better models at the places where we need it. Okay, this is just another topic. So, as usually, learning procedure in statistics, it means that we want to introduce some risk, and finally, this procedure of learning will be minimization of this risk, cost function if you want, etc., or loss discrepancy. So this is source of discrepancy. It is between our data and measurements, and then between this machine we can consider that this is kind of set of functions or something parameterized with parameters alpha. And of course, we would like to minimize the discrepancy or loss function of those functions between these two. I will show you some example later. Huh? So the problem of risk minimization finally is we have joint probability density function. X is a vector in multidimensional space, and Y is output space or dependent variable, if you want. So in fact, we would like to minimize this risk according to the joint distribution function between input-output, which we don't know at all. What we have just only our training data or our measurements. So this is a general fundamental but difficult problem. So how we can decompose and go into some details, but some concrete examples. There are three fundamental tasks of statistical learning. First one is classification, sometimes called pattern recognition in statistics, not in statistics, in machine learning. So when we are working with discrete classes, there are many problems, of course, when we want to classify some objects or some phenomena in space, in time, or in space time together. The second problem, which is more difficult a bit, this is a regression problem, when we are working with continuous variables. And the last one, the most difficult one, and it is the problem of probability density modeling. And this problem is directly related to so-called natural hazards, environmental risk, to risk measures. Because this problem means that if you have some models, some measurements in space, you don't want to model mean value or some kind of best, to do some kind of best interpolation. You want to go from measurements to probability. So at each point, instead of having one best prediction, you have a distribution function. So at the end, having all this complete information, you can prepare the most optimistic, pessimistic, realistic, or you can integrate this information as a technical basis. For example, if it is a pollution, with epidemiological models to study risk for the population, for the regions or environment. So, typical loss function for classification, of course, this is 0, 1. If you predict with your model a good label, yes, I will not penalize you. If not, you are penalized with 1. Classical example for two-class classification problem. For regression, well-known result is that mean square error, if you want, we are using error, and this is quadratic difference between data and machine. It's where we would like to minimize this function. Of course, there is it's nice because at the end, the result, the best result is so-called regression or conditional mean value. But one problem could be that, if you put here in square, and if you have outliers, then it's not the best way to do it. That's why there are also other approaches, like robust approaches in statistics, machine learning, etc., to treat also problem of outliers. And finally, probability density model. So basic learning approaches, supervised learning. So if you have a professor, you learn with a professor, this is a supervisor, this is a teacher. Unsupervised learning, it is you don't have a professor, a teacher, so you learn your data. A typical example here is clustering. So you have data, you want to cluster, to put them in different groups, take into account distance or similarities, some similarity measures. Reinforcement learning, semi-supervised learning, maybe you know what is that. So it means that very often we have part of information labeled, we have input independent variables plus dependent variables labeled in some places, but we can have a lot of information which was not labeled yet. And this is so-called semi-supervised. It is possible to take into account also this information together. Transaction I showed you, and active learning is a procedure. I will show you an example when I will try to optimize monitoring network. This is a procedure how model can help you tells you where to go and what to measure in order to reduce uncertainties, maybe better predictions, for example, etc. Depending on the criteria you are interested in. So, machine learning are efficient for many environmental applications. I mentioned already these task and problems before, because they are universal modeling tools. What does it mean? It means that in general, in principle, they can learn any problem with any precision. The problem how to do it, it depends on machine. There are many different techniques and also some, I would say, feature. So they are data driven, non-linear. Some of them are robust, which is very good, and they can work in high-dimensional spaces. So artificial neural networks of different architectures we have used already, like multi-layer perceptron, general regression neural networks, etc., self-organizing maps, like an example of unsupervised learning, mixture density network, Gaussian mixture models, etc. There is a whole, I would say, family of both supervised and unsupervised learning. Random forest and in some learning, so when you have ensemble of models, you can do different kind of averaging, and it helps in developing models and in predictions. And the last, but maybe the most successful story was with support vector machines and all these techniques like support vector regression and other kernel-based methods. I will show you some examples. So generic methodology, how we are applied for our data, this slide. So we have, of course, all the method depends, it's not just we have one method and we want to apply it everywhere, or we have some kind of tools. All depends on the quality and quantity of data and, of course, of objectives and problems of the study. So that's why you have to adapt your model, your modeling procedure, and all this according to data and objectives. Very important topic is monitoring networks. Monitoring networks not only in geographical space, but it can be high-dimensional space. And monitoring network, it can be also if you are working with physical models or geophysical models, and you have many parameters, you can think about space of parameters. So monitoring networks is the first question is you have done some measurements. What do these measurements represent? Which kind of phenomena you were able to detect, and what was missing? This question is not very common, but I will explain a little bit later with some example. Of course, explorative data analysis, explorative spatial data analysis, data preprocessing. Normally, it was a classical topic for visualization, for graphics, etc., but we start to apply modeling tool and machine learning algorithms already here, very efficiently. Because if you have your raw data and if some models, I would say intelligent machine learning from machine learning toolbox, can help you to understand, can give you some hints, it's already very nice to start at this level to do it. Then model, this one is extremely important, input space preparation and data splitting. So for example, we want to study landslides. So what is our input space? Which variables are important? Very good question. Of course, first we go to geomorphologists, to people who are working with this, who knows a little bit. Then we start to look at the literature, what was done and how. So this is a very difficult, interesting topic. But, for example, I will show you an example of these wind fields. When you want to model wind fields massively for Aeolian energy, you will see that depending on mass, you have to change also. And this is a big problem if you want to do it manually. So, next modeling tools, training, validation, feature selection, detection, analysis, modeling of patterns. First you have to detect if there is something in your data or not. If there is nothing in your data, okay, all analysis afterwards, it's maybe not useless, but it's difficult to justify and to explain the result. So very important part is testing of data. Again, exploratory analysis of the residuals. Here you have to look what is rest. What is rest after all this analysis and modeling, and finally applications, predictions, plus uncertainties, if possible. If you are capable to propose and to add to your results also uncertainties of modeling procedure. So some general comments I will give you here about these already topics. Now, if you have several models, which model we have to take? Well, of course, there is no free lunch, we know it very well, this theorem. So there is all the principles used in many sciences, especially in computational science, in informatics. Or contrary, the most simple explanation of the phenomena is more likely to be correct. So if you use this principle, we have two different topics about model assessment and model selection. There are two different goals, in fact. So first one, estimating the performance of different models in order to choose the best one. So between the group of models, you estimate them with using some measures, depend on information we are working with. And model assessment, assessment, having chosen a final model, estimating its prediction error, generalization error on new data. It's finally, after selection of the best model, we have to estimate generalization predictions. So at the end, the model has to pass exam and to be evaluated with some models. So usually how we are doing this is just general comment. It doesn't depend on which model you are using. So it is useful also for real modeling, environmental modeling, for example. So usually we split data, training, validation, testing we never use. This part of data we put in some safe place. It will be just for generalization. And then we use the training set to fit the model, the validation set to estimate prediction error for model selection and tuning hyperparameters. And at the end we estimate generalization error. So, and this is why we have to do it, because there is so-called bias-variance dilemma, and how to choose model complexity. You know, these are data with measurement points with errors, and if you take too simple model, you are not explaining your bias. If you take too complex model, you pass, but you overfit your data. It's nice, your training error is 0. Empirical risk is 0, but then you are very bad in predictions, in generalization. You will not pass exam. Because if somebody asks what is at this point, what is value, you will have these predictions, which is very high level. So, this is typical how we do it. I will use it. Just now to show, I will show you just one model. I don't know if you know about support-vector machines, who knows? Maybe, because I will use it for the. It's important not to miss it. So this is a SVM is a background model from statistical evidence theory or Vapnik-Chervonenkis theory. It has a solid mathematical background for dependencies estimation and predictive learning from finite data set. So it is very important because, you know, in all non-parametric statistics, what is important is that all theorems and all conclusions usually are made where number of data points goes to infinity under some conditions, etc., etc. Here, what we have really finite data set. So SVM is based on the structural risk minimization principle, aiming to minimize both the empirical risk, data minus model, empirical risk as usually, and the complexity of the model, thereby providing high generalization ability. So, just an example. Here we have error, and here is the complexity of model. Let's suppose that we have some parameter, for example, this Vapnik-Chervonenkis dimension, which is characterizing the complexity of model. And here test the training error. If model is very simple, we have large training error. We are very biased. You saw the first figure before. Now, when we increase complexity, we are reducing training error. If you do overfitting, it goes to 0. But then we have another term which is important, and this term is so-called confidence interval, confidence term. For low-level models or low, simple complexity models, we have this number very low, and then with increasing complexity, we are less and less confident in these complex models. Because when we overfit, we will be not able to generalize well. So that's why it goes up. So the principle of structural risk minimization principle is just the sum of 2. And if you put sum, you see that in the middle somewhere, you have optimal model, which is minimizing quite well training error or explaining your data and has adequate complexity. Okay, this is just okay. So these are just examples again. Very simple model, linear model, doesn't explain. Very complex, overfit, no confidence. And then in between, optimal model explains quite well what we have. So this is from this theorem, structural risk minimization, there is support-vector machine. So the problem is very simple. First, I will explain what is that. I will try to work with two-class classification problems. The task is to divide red dots from blue dots, to put a boundary. If data are linearly separable, you put a line and you divide this with training error 0, very, very nice. Very good. And this is the decision function, linear function, and then if you take signal, we have either this class or another. So, but look here, we have again the same. This is possible solution, linear, good, ideal solution because we have separated class. Okay. Another solution is also possible. So again, so which solution to take? So in fact, we can have almost an infinite number of solutions. Which solution is, I would say, the most appropriate for this task? And intuitively, I would like to tell you that it seems to be that if we put some boundary or decision function which is trying to push as far as possible classes, this could be the best solution. And of course, it is possible to demonstrate from statistical theory that yes, the decision which is maximizing margin between two classes, it is the best. The last one in Goose, this is a decision function. And of course, there is a lemma telling the complexity. You see, this is very nice because we have a simple linear model and not all linear models have the same complexity, which is a bit strange, yeah? Seems to be. But I would like to tell you the complexity of this model is a minimum between n plus 1, it means dimension of space plus 1. If you are working in two-dimensional space, line is parameterized by 2C parameters. It's very easy, it's hyperspace, number of parameters. But another side is W is a slope of this linear function, and R is a sphere or ball which includes all our finite data set. So if we minimize this one, W, we try to minimize the slope of this line, we can control the complexity of different lines. Okay, very nice. Simple problem, optimization problem. We can solve it very easily, and then, of course, give a representation. What is important that this problem is just a convex optimization problem, one unique solution, no local minimum, that's it. So we have only unique solution. Then next step is to see about solutions, and you will see that everywhere in equations and finally in decision function, all dependence on the coordinates is just dot product. There is no dependencies independently from coordinates, just dot product. Point of prediction, data measurements. Data measurements 1, data measurement 2, that's it. So it will be very important for the future. Next step is, okay, you showed us ideal situation, and we never saw it in reality. If we have here blue, and somewhere red here, so what we should do? Should we modify this solution to take into account, or we can tell, okay, data are with error measurements, there is some noise, so we have to accept some noise. But what we would like to minimize, we would like to minimize the number of points, strange points, or noisy points, or strange points. Huh? So instead of minimizing just W square, which was the slope of line, we add also the slack variables. Distance from good body, this point should be at least here or here. So this is this distance, and we introduce regularization parameter C, which will control how many this kind of points we accept or not. So now we know how to solve simple problems with noise or with strange data. But then you can tell, sorry, this is explanation of this point. Right? So in this solution, you know, decision function, linear model, y labels plus minus 1, coordinates, this is a bias, alpha e are parameters. If these parameters are 0, they are normal samples, they don't contribute to the solution. Why? Because we care. In order to derive this boundary, which is maximizing these two groups, we need only 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Having this point, this one, I can put this, I would say, boundaries for each class, and then in between, I will put the final decision boundary. So all other points do not contribute to the solution. This is a very nice property. This is a property of sparseness of the solution. And of course, if you know a priori which point of measurements could be potentially support vector, then you will go to measure at this point. Because if you measure here, it will not contribute to the, you know exactly that this is a blue or red. So there are normal samples, subprotractors, and subprotractors are typical or noisy, which are like just either between the margin or on the side of another class. So that's why this is just simple explanation. But we know that the world is nonlinear, and that because all was dependent just on dot product, we can go from dot product to higher dimensional space, from two-dimensional space, for example. And as usually, really in higher dimensional space, the life is more easy, linear, and we can apply the same approach. And it's exactly, if we go from x and x prime to making some transformation phi, we don't know it. We arrive at the same equations, but at the end we can replace this dot product of this function by the kernels. And in Hilbert spaces, it is possible if kernels follow some kind of Mercer condition, which K is symmetric and positive definite. So here you see there is an example. There is one class, another one, and in the middle red. So you cannot separate by line these two classes. But think about it. If you go from this two-dimensional space, if I will take this red part and to move to the third dimension, then we can cut with the surface very easily. And this transformation is here from two-dimensional space to three-dimensional space, and then cut with linear model. We have solution. So now we know how to solve this problem, and then there are some kernels: polynomial, radial basis function, hyperbolic tangent, etc., etc. The solution is exactly the same. Just before it was dot product between coordinates, now it is a kernel. So that's it for this one model I will use later. Now I will show you, we are considering, for example, we can consider k-nearest neighbor as a benchmark model. What is k-nearest neighbor? You find k-nearest neighbor, you do averaging, and the solution is here. If it is regression, or you vote, and then who is a linear, this class, you get a sign. Very easy. It has some very nice properties, k-nearest neighbor. The problem is how to find k. How many k is good for your data? Well, you use cross-validation, for example. You know what is cross-validation? You have your data, you divide your data into k-fold cross-validation into 10 subsets. You take one subset, and you try to predict this subset with other 9. But you have prediction, but you have also measurement, so you can compute error. You do it for second, you do average at the end, and then you have cross-validation error for one nearest neighbor. Then you check 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you have cross-validation curve. Here you have cross-validation curve, you have number of neighbors and cross-validation error. So what is interesting? Here just is an example, two-dimensional example, which was generated just randomly. And if you generate randomly, so we can tell there is no structure, no pattern. So what should be the output from cross-validation error? What is the answer? So if you have no structure, no pattern, we have no space, what we can tell about the data? Well, we can tell there is a mean value. We can do classical standard statistics. And then here we will find no minimum, no best k. Because what is the best k? You have to take all data and do averaging. So this is just, so using this technique, already somebody sent you data, you take in a neighbor, it can be 10-dimensional space, 20, I don't know. You run, you see, you can tell there is no structure in your data. What is interesting and important, because not to forget, now, if you have some structures, this cross-validation curve, nearest neighbor is the best value to use to make these predictions. But I will use this technique and this also philosophy at the end. So after modeling, I have a model, data, information, patterns, and the rest. I don't know, noise, unstructured information. So I can run again my k-nearest neighbor on this part at the end. And if I will find some structure, I will tell not, model has not extracted all useful information. So we have to change model and to do better. So this is how it works. But after, we can do even better, and I will show you this general regression neural network, some short example. So advanced automatic processing of data, as I told you, we have a lot of data which are coming from space, from monitoring systems. So we would like to have these properties. Detection of patterns, yes, universal nonlinear modeling, adaptive, automatic feature selection. For example, if you know that in your data, I will show you an example. In your data, you have some non-relevant features, some completely noise or I don't know, features which has nothing to do with your data. You would like that these features will be removed or eliminated almost automatically. It's better to do automatically. So, quality of network, computational efficiency. So, I will propose general regression neural network. General regression neural network is just introduced in 91. But in fact, it is a reformulation of well-known Mandara-Watson estimator from non-parametric statistics. That's it. If you want to make prediction at this point, you have your data measurements and you use this kernel, exponential kernel, and then you just sum that all weights, sum of all weights equals to 0. Huh? This is normalization factor. That's it. So this we have m variables, m input variables, and then we have n measurements. So and we realize that sigma kernel bandwidth will depend on input variable. It's more general model than just to have one unit sigma. Okay, we have several kernels possible. To tune kernel parameters like sigma, we can use again cross validation, or you can use more advanced technique if you prefer simulated learning for something else. Okay, now I will just show you an example. So if you have true function here, sigma very small, we have over fitting. Very large over smoothing, and in between this cross validation, we can find a good parameter sigma. Okay, now some properties very important. When bandwidth is small, over 50, then there is no structure in our data, and we fall down into this equation, which means there is no structure, it's just mean value of your data. You have no space. When bandwidth for some coordinate, y, or independent variable, is large, this coordinate will be filtered out. So if I will find for somebody that sigma is very large, what does it mean? Very large in comparison with all possible distances for this variable, then this exponential function will be 1, and this one is not considered. Okay, this is just properties. I will show you Gini-evaluate multivariate data, measurements pollution data. We have bathymetry, three-dimensional space, x, y, z. We have this nickel pollutant. Here, this is a structure. And very often, because it's very difficult, especially when you're working with high-dimensional data and complex patterns, it's very difficult to justify how much structure do you have, which kind of structure. It's very nice to do what? You shuffle your data, you shape your data, you destroy. By construction, if there is something, you destroy it. And then you compare, because very often, relative analysis is easier. And so here, this is a real data set, and this is data set after shuffling, destroyed. Here, cross-validation curve for sigma minimum, very nice. This sigma is optimal, and I can tell you to Gini-evaluate for x coordinate it's around 2 kilometers, for y 1.3, and also for z coordinates we can find it. Very nice. But for shuffle data, no. Sigma is very large. We just average our data, no structure. Yes, we destroyed it. So here it is interesting observation, analysis with anisotropic, and analysis of your residuals. Here I want to show you. Now I have done this modeling with my good model, but here I have added, I had x, y, z plus 3 coordinates which would just shuffle x, y, z, so destroy. So 3 noisy coordinates. So I have 6-dimensional space, and you see almost automatically these coordinates were neglected because, for example, for bathymetry I have 2.5 kilometers, and the largest depth in Geneva Lake is around 300 meters. So all these noisy coordinates automatically were neglected, and the result of analysis is good. Here there is a result also with anisotropic model for the residuals. And residuals, you see, we have x, y, z coordinates, it's in meters 10 power 12. So it's infinite. Sigma is infinite. So again, in our residuals, there is no structure. Very good job done. Automatically, so we didn't introduce something else. With general mapping, it is interesting that we can have also uncertainties assessment or predict confidence intervals. And many years ago, we have proposed, because very often it's difficult to explain uncertainties, especially when you are speaking with decision makers. So introduce that there is nothing, there is no object like isoline of pollution, temperature or something. What is important, so-called sick isoline. You can tell, is this zone of this sick isoline with according to some modeling procedure, with 95%, I'm sure that you will find this isoline. So this information is just shown here, like sick isolines and say. So Winfield in Switzerland, I still have some time, we started late. Now I will show you another more difficult and real example in Switzerland with Winfield. So we will use adaptive general regression neural network. It means that it will try to analyze also input features and to rank them. So here we have our digital elimination model, and then we have generated many different characteristics which are important for Winfields monthly. So for example, slope, curvature, valley, etc., etc. Then you discuss with meteorologists, with other people who do this modeling, and then you generate all this stuff, and you arrive at this number of input space variables. Very nice. And then we use adaptive general regression neural networks, or with optimized sigma. And of course, here we have all these input features and sigma. And as I told you, the smallest sigma is the most important. And then you can rank all these features and to see who is contributing how much for your solution. But it is done automatically. Okay, what is interesting, monthly precipitation, you see with adaptive general regression, we have the best solution, but it depends on season and on months. All this kind of stuff depends, I would say, quality of prediction. So here, just for season, this next. Now, active learning for monitoring network optimization, I will continue with Winfields. So the question is, if you want to improve or to put some station here, what we should do? We have some legislation in Switzerland which says average wind speed must exceed 4.5 meters per second, and some other criteria. Okay, let's use this threshold, use our data, and to pose a problem like a two-class classification problem. One class is above, another class is below. And if we are able to add some probabilities to these classes, it would be very nice, and we can maybe try to find some interesting spaces in Switzerland where we could put some monitoring stations to improve predictions. So here, as I told you, with expert, and we have now also feature extraction. At the end, it is 13-dimensional space. These are some features, how they look like in Switzerland, very complex. And active learning is a way to build efficient training set, build computationally interesting models, and pay less for the same effort. So here, usually, we have data generator, we have also passive learner. Data are coming, you develop model, you do output, you predict. That's it. With active learner, you have data generator, you do query of data, you learn this data, you give response, and you try to pick special data, which will help you to go faster and to make better predictions. Then you move on. Here is an example about random data set. We have a pool of data. We have several classes in different types. So if you take randomly from this data set, you have this part. So you see, you can use this information also for discrimination between classes, but maybe it's better with active training set. And here we have used support vector machines, as I told you, with these properties, sparseness. So, and you see, we are trying to select just data points which are nearby the boundaries. So we would like to better and better precise and to discriminate between classes. This is how it works. Just a principle. Uncertainty sampling, heuristic, the sample reduced uncertainty of the current model. So where you would like to go and to measure if you use this principle. Of course, in the region which is the most uncertain, where you are almost sure, or you discuss with five friends told you, it is red, okay, you will not go to measure because no sense. In region where you have 4-1 will tell you blue, maybe also, but if it is 2-2 or 3-3, very uncertain, maybe it's better to go to measure and to precise this information because it will improve your predictions. So there are many different heuristics and this active learning technique. Also, it works very well for remote sensing images. So if you have very few samples, only on ground truth, then you want to go better and faster, then active learning technique is very good approach. So here for data modeling, we have answered this at 6 years, 72 months. We have used support vector machines, of course. And then the classification results, multi-temporal classification, different years and different months, but we have many of them. This is sum of all these maps. Now, this prediction can be improved. How? With active learning. So what we have done, we have used a criteria which is mode selection. So here, for 72 points, we have different decision functions for support vector machines. And you see, if you are here in this region between plus minus 1, it means that you are inside the boundary, inside the margin. So you are very uncertain about the result. If you are outside far, okay, you will not take this region for improving measurements and doing better. So this is a whole map for the whole Switzerland of this kind of information. And finally, we have found some places to propose for monitoring network optimization for wind fields, massive wind fields in Switzerland. So this is an example from renewable resources. And for landslides data, again the same. So very often, as I told you from the beginning, the problem is the same. You have to construct your input space, you embed your phenomena in this feature space, you apply your model, of course you try to understand how much information brings your measurements. Then you apply your model to this. And then it is very interesting that this model has also feature selection or feature extraction motor inside. And this is so-called rapid approach. So when model is trying to play with many different possibilities and then to optimize and to select the most relevant group of characteristics and features. Of course, this is about landslide, so we have feature, slope, lithology. Interesting case study because here we have to mix both continuous information and categorical information like geology, lithology, and digital elevation model and other topics. So these are characteristics of lithology and all number of characteristics. So which algorithms we have applied? We have adaptive scaling support vector machines, recursive feature elimination, and random forest. So I will just tell about this one. As I showed you, when you are using with support vector machine, there is a curve, Gaussian curve, it was sigma. Like with general regression neural network, you can have different sigma for different features. It's more difficult to compute, there are some mathematical basis how to do it, but at the end you have a ranking of the features, your characteristics. So you discuss with experts and you see what's happened. So this we have done. This is a map which can be transformed into probability map of having landslides, and this is a so-called ground truth, where landslides will observe. Well, quite good correspondence. Of course, correspondence and depends also on different regions. If you have in mountainous complex regions, it's more difficult. If it is like plateau or Jura region, which is more easy, a bit easy, then you have better predictability. And finally, we have this kind of map. Okay. So I have, of course, many topics to continue, but now it's time to speak about new challenges. New I put, you see, in this because always we are struggling, we are doing, for us what is important, we are partly developing different models, but we are much more interested in solving problems, like problems in natural hazards, problems in socio-economic sustainability analysis, etc. So, scaling of the models, dimensionality, number of data, big data, okay, everybody is speaking about it, I will not continue. Active learning and monitoring network optimization, it works very well for many different cases, but still there is a room to do it, especially for regression problems. From dependencies to cause-effect relationships. You know, recently in machine learning, not only, but statistics, there is a huge movement, just because very often we are using just correlations or dependencies between data, and we are not looking who is the cause or who is the consequence. So in real data applications, this can be important. So multitask learning. So this is an interesting topic because if you have several tasks and problems and you believe, you think about study, there is something in common, or there is some relatedness between different tasks. Maybe if you run together, you can improve learning of each particular task. I have done some analysis for pollution data with some technique of multitask learning. It works quite well, but it was just the very beginning. High-dimensional space-time data. Now, if we have spatial temporal data, it's again more complex, where we have also time. Okay, intrinsic dimensional estimation, dimensional reduction, etc. It is intrinsic dimensional estimation. For example, here we are in three-dimensional space, but the surface of table is two-dimensional. So intrinsic dimension of surface of table is 2, but in three-dimensional space. This is easy to detect because with linear model you can detect it. But if you have Swiss roll like this, you have to apply other kind of techniques, nonlinear techniques in there. And if you know intrinsic dimension of your phenomena, it gives you some idea about how many real coordinates or real variables are responsible for your phenomena. Then, when you do feature selection, you almost know how many, 5, 6, 7, etc. Uncertainties, still, to characterize it, especially now it's better lately, but we have to continue with uncertainties from original data, raw data, until the end. Simulations, risk and extremes. For example, as I told you, the model mean square error, which is minimizing this quadratic loss function, is not adequate at all for working for extremes. This measure is concentrating on mean value, on the body of distribution. If you are looking for extremes, for extremes, these are risks for any kind of studies. This is an interesting and challenging topic. Geomanifold logic, integration of science-based new challenges. Something I have some slides. So this is, for example, okay. Geomanifold logic, I will just show you. So, in fact, if you want to model, for example, pollution of river systems, you cannot use two-dimensional space. You have to use this river system. You have to construct a graph and model on this graph, for example. Or it can be in the city, etc. So, anthropogenic structures. Multi-scale behavior. Still, we have done some studies. There are some approaches which can help, but still it's not very clear and a lot of work to be done. So, for example, kernels or on geomanifolds. So, if you construct graph on your network road, you can do modeling this way and not like in empty space. Okay, thank you for your attention. So, if somebody has some interest, we have some books with technical details. Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Yes, please.
In all of your work, when you're dealing with uncertainty, you generally just use probability.
I never heard the word fuzzy mentioned at all. So, believing that omissions are not accidents, to quote Marion Moore, I wondered why that was.
Okay. I would say fuzzy is one possibility how to treat uncertainties. So we have done some analysis, but here basically it was probability. We have used either after post-processing or just incorporate before. For example, if you are working with Gaussian processes, or if you are working with another, at the end, almost automatically you have results with uncertainties. For example, variance. It's just time. I didn't concentrate too much on this. I wanted just to show some general flow chart, what I think about these problems, and 1, 2, 3 examples which are not trivial, in fact.
Yeah, I have one question about your technique, which you have shown when you map low-dimensional data to high dimensions. Is it, if there is a technique which, like algorithm, how to construct such mapping, or it just depending on data you have experience and you can construct or is a method.
In fact, the answer is very simple. You do projection, you do the same analysis, and you arrive at dot products, but now with transformed coordinates, nonlinear. And then you replace this dot product by kernel in our original space. So you don't know. Maybe your problem is so difficult that maybe you have to go to infinite dimensional space. But you don't need to know it because this is so-called kernel trick. After all this procedure, because, and of course I have to mention that all models which arrive at solutions and equations where you have only dot product between coordinates were kernelized. For example, principal component analysis was kernelized. You have kernel principal component analysis, which is a nonlinear analog of PCA. And then you have all these kind of models. So in reality, you don't need to know it. Because it is just due to this trick.
I have a question about the wind use case that you mentioned. You said that if the wind is more than 4.5 meters per second, right? But I guess that there is some seasonality involved in that problem because summer and winter are different. So my question is, how did you involve the seasonality information to your model?
Seasonality here, it was just taken into account. We put all together all information during 6 years, 12 months, monthly data. We have done analysis month by month, and then we put in one back and we started to analyze. Because in this case you need just average seasonality more or less. Then you have to have on average this region about this level. So what before when I showed you study, I showed you that for example maps for different seasons were different. Yes, of course there is also quality of predictions, etc. But for the study of monitoring network optimization, we use this information to characterize uncertainty. And this uncertainty was also incorporated like seasonal uncertainty, variability in this information.
Another question from the audience? If not, I have maybe a provocative one. I hope. There is a question there.
Just one general question, because maybe this is something you haven't touched. I see these models that when you have plenty of parameters and how do you, I mean, do you take into account, how do you control the sensitivity of the results on these parameters which you, I mean, from case to case have to calibrate and so on and so on? Because the impression is, of course, I mean, the general impression is that when models are so rich and so sophisticated and so on, the sensitivity to parameters of the outputs is basically everything. And how, the more general question is then, how can we be, have some belief in the capacity of especially prediction models to make reasonable predictions or accurate predictions or precise predictions when the sensitivity to these parameters is such and so large?
Okay, thanks for the question. I didn't show it because it takes time, it's technical as it is, but this problem is partly solved during training and validation procedure. When we are doing training and validation of we try to find adequate complexity, to select relevant group of features, etc., we are doing all this stuff. we are comparing, we are doing, it's kind of, you create these many models, I have to model assessment and model selection procedure during this stage, yes. Finally, to believe or not, as I told you, at the end we have test data, which was never used, and we try to predict on this test data. And we estimate, well, it depends how many data points you have, etc. But on this test data, you estimate the generalization ability of your model, so predictability on never seen data. And after, it depends if it is acceptable or not, this error rate, or etc. So this is how it works here. It's a training and validation procedure. We are playing with all these parameters.
So just a telegraphic question about you very shortly mentioned for a second the issue of big data. So my question would be, how big is big data, and is big data really something different than what we are used to see, and do they really require specific techniques to be managed which are very much different than the ones that you've been using and showing us during your keynote speech? Is there a specific important role for machine learning to deal with big data or not?